The sensible place to start is with the login and sign-up processes and the way they tie to the server. The login change is trivial. We need to replace the action listener of the login button with this new one. We use the user object as a data transfer object. We set the password and phone/email to send them to the server. The Infinite Progress UI is a bit of a shortcut, but for a feature like login, it makes more sense as we can't avoid a delay. A successful login shows the main UI, whereas an error just shows the error message. Both dispose the Infinite Progress dialog. That's pretty simple and should work right away if we had a user object in place. To add a new user, we need to overhaul the sign-up form. As you may recall, the sign-up form has a series of methods to create the wizard flow UI. This series of methods should generate a user object that we can use for sign-up. The first in the series is the createTerms method. Since that method doesn't include any data, there is no need for a user object there. The second method is createName, and there we already have some work. Since this is the first stage in the wizard, we create the user and binding instances. Binding means changes to the UI instantly change this field and vice versa. That's very convenient. The createBirthday method now accepts the user and binding objects, so we can fill them up with further details. That's simple enough. The binding implicitly updates the user object with changes from the UI. Next, we can proceed to the changes in the birthday method. Obviously, the first change in the method is the signature, which now accepts the user and binding. Other than the method signature, we added this line to bind the date picker to the birthday. And we added the arguments to the gender method too. This leads us to the changes in the createGender method. Since most of the changes are repetitive, I'll skip the method signature and the signature of the follow-up createNumber method. Suffice to say, we pass the user and binding onward. This is the binding code for the gender that automatically sets male/female for the gender attribute based on the radio button selection. It's a special case because these are buttons, so we need to provide the values that match each button. The createNumber changes are a bit different because of the symbiotic relationship to the createEmail method. I'll list more of the code, but I'll skip the createEmail method as the changes there are obvious. The change itself is in the createMobile or email method, which is common to createNumber and createEmail. This is the only change in this method. It's right under the declaration of text entry, but in effect it can be anywhere in the method. We bind the property to the text component, both of which are passed as arguments to this method. The final piece of the wizard is the createPassword method, which follows up with a code change that's pretty similar to everything we saw so far, at least initially. The binding call is pretty standard as we had up until now. We launch a progress dialog that runs while we wait for signup to complete. If signup was successful, we go to the confirmation UI and wait for that. That effectively creates a user on the server and triggered an email or SMS to us. We can now check the confirmation value to see if the user is indeed valid. We do that by adding this code to the createConfirmation method. If verification succeeded, we show the main UI. Otherwise, we show an error message and remain in the current form. We still have one more change to make to the UI controller class. Up until now, we always started with the login form, but we should only start there when we are logged out. We can just change the call to show main UI to this. If we aren't logged in correctly, we behave as before, after the splash screen. However, if we are logged in, we go to the main UI. With that, a new user is in place and should allow us to log in to the app.